The following presentation is brought to you by the Realm Network.
It's right about time again to swerve again, confuse the general fans again.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition. I don't know if this is going to be the Swerve or Shoot to Thrill. I have no idea what show this is going to be, so I'm not going to label it. But it's a show. And it's a show I'm really, really excited about because this is a person, I mean, I go back literally over 20 years now. One of probably the very first relationship that I formed in the wrestling business when I went to work for the WWE, like 93, 94, as the editor of the magazine. I think it's fair to say that this is the first person that I formed a relationship with and a friendship with. And I got to be honest with you. I've always been afraid to say this because I don't want to put heat on the other person. But with all due respect, this guy's my mentor. You know, I've told a story many times about Bill Watts inviting me into a creative meeting. But once I got into the creative meeting, Watts was gone literally in a week. And this person took me under his wing and really taught me the ropes, you know, very early on when I got in the business. And like I said, I've never called you my mentor before because I didn't want to put any heat on you. I'm talking about Bruce Prichard. Bruce, how do you feel about me calling you my mentor?
What the hell? Why you got to put so much heat on me right off the bat? I hear Cornette from Google right now. So you're the son of a bitch. I got to kill you. Well, no, man, come on. You know, it was one of those deals where you had a passion for the business. You had a love for the business. And, you know, you and I always talked when you did the magazine stuff. And it was what it was. We needed help. We solicited from any and everybody. So, yeah, I'm kind of proud of that. I think we both had good track records.
Well, unfortunately, the needing help and the soliciting everybody, I don't think works in today's professional wrestling. But we'll get to that in a minute, Bruce. But, Bruce, you want to hear the funny thing, Bruce? You know, bro, about 9 months ago, I talked to you about this briefly before. You know, Roddy Piper, and this is where I was going to start with you anyway, Bruce, because I know your relationship. But Piper invited me on his show. And of course, bro, I was honored to do it, even though I knew Roddy had some kind of heat with me, right? So, bro, we're going in the interview and Roddy starts going down the road of the Attitude Era and the Crash TV and this, that, and the other thing. And I said, wait a minute, Roddy. And I had to explain to him, Bruce, the promos from WrestleMania 1 with him and Orton and Orndorff. And I said, Roddy, that influenced me as a writer. That made me want to get into the wrestling business. So I put the blame on Vince Russo on Piper too. But Bruce, I know you were really, really, really tight with Roddy, and I know what happened. You know, gosh, bro, not even 2 weeks ago, you know, came as a total shock to you. Can you give us just some insights into the Roddy Piper you knew?
The Roddy Piper that I knew was one of the most loving, kind human beings I ever had the pleasure to know. You know, you talk about influences and you talk about people that help you in your career that leave a mark forever. Roddy Piper. I stole so much from Roddy Piper. There would not have been a Brother Love show if it wasn't for Piper's Pit. But I will go back to late 70s when we used to get television in Houston. We would get the Los Angeles television. It was all Spanish, and Roddy Piper was the top heel in L.A. And not being fluent in Spanish or understanding a word other than hola and adios, you kind of sound like Roddy Piper, Roddy Piper, Chavo Guerrero y Roddy Piper. And this guy, I would sit through an hour of Spanish-speaking television just to see Roddy Piper, just to hear Roddy Piper promos. And I'm talking, you know, like 77, even before that. And Roddy was this red-hot heel in Los Angeles, California. And he crossed all barriers. So then you kind of fast forward to Georgia. He was doing color commentary with Gordon Soley. is Rod Piper. Hello there, Mr. Soley. Good to see you, sir. Yeah, it's really nice here in Atlanta. Glad to be with the fans out there. And then he would just take these subtle digs at Bob Armstrong. They never introduced Roddy as a wrestler. He was a personality. He was Rod Piper. And for those who knew, they knew. Those who didn't know, it was just this guy, and he would get under your skin. Went to the Mid-Atlantic. Man, he ended up in WWF, and, the rest is history. But Roddy Piper was a very unique character in and of himself. And the difference between Roddy Piper and so many other characters, if you will, Roddy believed. Everything he did, he believed it. Because that was him. And from a personal standpoint, I'll tell you a story. We're going to do WrestleMania 5. And Roddy left when I came, right after WrestleMania 3. I started at the WWF right after WrestleMania 3. So I didn't get a chance to work with Roddy until I debuted Brother Love. I was, if I dare say so myself, I was fairly hot at the time as a heel. And we had times where we were going to have Jessica Hahn as my guest. We were going to do some other things. And Morton Downey Jr. was one of the hottest things on television as well. And he had his talk show, smoked a cigarette. We'll actually do it later. We were able to snag Morton Downey Jr. as a guest for Brother Love show at WrestleMania. And Vince calls me into his office and says, "Pal, sorry, not going to be a Brother Love show at WrestleMania." And, kid from Houston makes big time. It's going to be on WrestleMania. It's like, not going to be a Brother Love show, pal. Sorry. I know your heart's broken, but got an idea. What if, instead of the Brother Love show, we had Piper's Pit? And as a fan of Roddy, I'd never worked with him before. And I'm just out of my mind because the chance to be in WrestleMania, now I know I'm back in WrestleMania. I got a good feeling Morton Downey's going to be a part of this. And I get to work with Roddy Piper. So he says, Hot Rod? No, I met him a couple times, but I don't know him. Never got to work with him over the years. I met him, years and years ago. He says, need you to come up with something. And I'd like for you to go out and meet with Hot Rod. Get to know him. Going to do a little thing and figure out what we want to do. And let's have a kind of a dry run out in Denver, Colorado. So over the moon. Not only do I get to go out and do a Brother Love show with Piper as my guest in Denver, off Broadway. So fly into Denver, man. I'd never been in Denver. It's a little different when you're not used to breathing that thin air.
Right.
And I'm all hyped up anyway because I'm thinking, God, I'm going to work with Hot Rod. I'm going to work with Hot Rod. And with excitement, and I'm fat, and I can't breathe. So I go in and I get there, and Jack Lanza has secured a dressing room. Not like just a little dressing room, like a whole dressing room for me and Roddy. So automatically I've got heat with everybody else because I've got my own dressing room with Hot Rod and all this shit. So Roddy comes in and, hey, how you doing? Blah, blah, blah. And he says, nice to meet you, son. He's very touchy-feely. And I said, I'd like to throw a couple ideas by you, what I'd like to do. Because Vince has told me now, go out, figure out what to do at WrestleMania. Mm-hmm. Well, I had all this shit in my head. And I look at him. I said, well, you know, man, I do it pretty good to you. He gets that grin on his face because everybody also told me he hated when people would imitate him.
Right.
And I said, oh, yeah, no, man, I go real good there. You know, I kind of, hot rod Roddy Piper. Just when you got all the questions, I change the answers. He cocks his head, staring at me like, that's real nice there, son. So what do you got in mind there? I said, well, how about if I do this thing, man? I ask you questions, and I hold the mic, but I don't let you answer. I answer it for you as you. Huh. Yeah, okay, and then what? I go on and on. He says, so I make my big return, and we're going to be here tonight, and you're not going to let me talk. That's what I do, okay? No, you'll get your chance. So, okay. Thank you for that, man. I appreciate you letting me have my chance to, talk there because that's what I do. Said, no, you get it. Then you do this. And he says, how about we just go on out there and we feel it out? Cool. It's good, but kind of I'm trying to gear this to WrestleMania. I'm trying to talk to him about Morton Downey and different things we can do. And he's like, let's just go to the ring, man. Let's just go have some fun. And I go do my thing, and I interrupt him, and I answer. Oh, no, brother love. Man, no, I watch your show. I love you, and all this shit. And out of nowhere, he snatches the microphone and hit me with his right hand. And if the ropes had not been there, I'd have been in about the third row. I hooked the middle rope, and I look at him. I said, we cool? He goes, oh, yeah, son, come on. And we finished the deal, and he kicked the shit out of me, and we went back, and I thanked him just immensely. And he says, we might have something there, man. I like that. You didn't have to talk everything out, man. He goes, no, I like that. We had a good little flow there. And then we entered Morton Downey, and just kind of blew up. But over the years with Roddy, he was a mentor to me. He was a friend. He was a brother. You always say in this business, and you know this, man, if you can have 5 people that you can call friends in this business, then you're pretty lucky. Yeah. And I would consider Roddy one of those people.
Well, Bruce, I think you can consider a lot of them, some of those people, and I'm going to get into some of those greats, people that I personally know that you had great relationships with. But, Bruce, I want to ask you this. Listen, you just said you started a little bit after WrestleMania 3. I told you I myself was at WrestleMania 4 and WrestleMania 5 in Atlantic City. I went with a group of friends. Bruce, I want to ask you this, man, because I don't there may not be anybody better on the planet to answer this than you. Maybe Vince, but I know you. Bruce, when I look back at that era, let's talk about you first coming into the WWE, WrestleMania 4, WrestleMania 5. I remember vividly. And bro, I remember the Pipers. I remember the DiBiase's. I remember the Savages. I remember the Hogans. Of course, I remember all those guys. But, Bruce, let me ask you this. Take a guy like Piper, but it's almost like, we could put Savage in there, or we could put DiBiase in there. It's almost like everybody that was on the card you could put in there. And I guess my question to you is this, Bruce. When I look at wrestling back then, you could not teach Roddy Piper how to be Roddy Piper. You could not teach the $1 Million Man how to be the $1 Million Man or Savage right on down the road. I look at wrestling today, Bruce, and it's like everybody wants to be a wrestler. These guys were wrestlers. They were stars, Bruce. Bruce, could you have taught a Roddy Piper how to be a Roddy Piper?
His personality, his character was so strong. And it was who he was. And they had done those characters their entire career. But you mentioned DiBiase. I did teach Ted DiBiase how to be the $1 Million Man. And you constantly had to ask him, it's like, okay, now, what Ted would do. What would the $1 Million Man do? And Vince would reinforce with him to live the gimmick. And by that, it meant that if someone challenged that gimmick in public, and Ted had to whip out a wad of $100 bills and pay off $5,000 or whatever it is to prove that he's the $1 Million Man, that's what he did. And it took time because, and I traveled with Ted, I did those vignettes with Ted, and was constantly in his head with his promos about it's the old, well, hey, Scott Hall doesn't have a problem with that, but would Razor do that? Okay. But Ted, it was, you had to get into him. You got to be an asshole, Ted. You've got to be an asshole. And that did take teaching. Some of the guys did take teaching. But Roddy Piper, Hulk, Macho Man. That's who they were. Their character was honed from not having anything else and having to create something that was relevant. And that's what they did. So you really didn't have to teach them much.
Bruce, when you first was starting with the WWE again, going back to 86, 87, that era, that was right around the rise of Savage. I mean, Savage was really starting to come into his own then. Bruce, when I know you were the guy, behind the scenes, working with the talent, produced the talent. You've done that for over 20 years, much longer than that. But, Bruce, it seems to me like I know my last years in the business at TNA. And, bro, I'd say almost the last, 7, 8 years, I started seeing more of a shift, Bruce, going from a character to the actual match itself. Back then, when you're talking about these larger-than-life characters, bro, these huge personalities. I mean, bro, people today still talk about DiBiase kicking the basketball. We haven't forgotten that after 25 years. But, Bruce, the psychology, was there more of an emphasis put on the character back then than there is today?
Wholeheartedly. And you bring up the basketball. And you know why you bring up the basketball? Because everything that Ted did up until that point, he paid money to get the better hotel room. He paid people off the swimming pool closed. He paid people to come in the ring and kiss his feet. He paid people to do things, but he paid. So if you're a fan, you're sitting in the audience, I like this guy. So the basketball was the turning point that defined that character, because it's like, all right, kid, do this. I'm going to give you $500. The kid's know he's going to do it, and the crowd's behind him, and he kicks the ball. And you know what happens, kid? When you don't do the job, you don't get paid. That made him a heel, because they were cheering him in the arenas. They liked him.
Bruce, was it that those characters that you eventually got to work with, Bruce, was it that those characters, the personalities, was it that they were being built on the regional level? So when they finally got to the WWE, there was some substance there. There was a character, and you just really had to fine-tune it and get it over the top. Because is that the problem today? Is that why we're not seeing the characters we did back then? Because maybe there's really not a time for the talent today to craft that talent.
There's no time and there's no place. That's the crime, because the talent comes in, and when the first thing, we did a fantasy camp at Booker T's last Sunday, and people come in, they try it, see if it's for them or whatever. And they, without taking bump one, without hitting one rope, they're asking, well, I've been thinking about my character, and I'm thinking about what kind of character do you think I should have? I'm looking at them, I don't know you. So I can't tell you that. I haven't seen you step into a ring yet, so I don't even know if this is for you. And when the first thing of somebody that's an aspiring wrestler or sports entertainer, whatever you want to call them, when they're just thinking about what's my character instead of how do I learn my craft? How do I learn the fundamentals? And then be able to grow a character out of that and make it organic. It's, you know, the best characters are extensions of who they are. Randy Savage was the Macho Man. You know, The Undertaker, a lot of respects. Mark Calloway is the Dead Man. But that's another one. He became that. He lives it. Ric Flair, he's the nature boy. He is what he is. But when you start off with the character, and now I have to become that versus being something like Stone Cold Steve Austin. He's a redneck from Texas that defies authority, and all we did, turn that up. And it was easy because he wasn't putting on. He wasn't trying to be something he wasn't.
Yeah. Bruce, I want to ask you this. You talked about Savage, and, you know, bro, I was the biggest Savage mark on the planet. The reason why I went to WrestleMania 4 and 5. But, Bruce, I have to ask you this. And, I'm going to be a total mark here because there's nobody else I could ever ask these questions to but you. But, Bruce, we know WrestleMania 3, you know, Hogan beats Andre. That's the pinnacle of his career, okay? Then, all of a sudden, like I said, I mean, I think WrestleMania 4 was the tournament, you know, where Savage came out on top. WrestleMania 5, then you had the Savage Hogan thing, okay? But, man, Bruce, I got to ask you this. You know, you got Hulk, who's larger than life, and, you know, Hulkamania, the whole 9 yards. But then on the other hand, bro, around the WrestleMania 4 and 5 time, you got Savage really coming into his own, and he's getting over huge. Now, Bruce, through the years, you know, when you're in the business and you're working it and you understand, a lot of the boys, it's you know, me, myself, and I, we're independent contractors. I got to protect my spot. I got to stay on top. Okay, I mean, we've both seen it a zillion times. Right. But in the case of Hogan and Savage, bro, it's like I can't see like a guy like Savage being a victim of that because he was so good. And you could tell, bro, he wasn't the timid guy sitting in the locker room. So now you got Hulk who's on top and Hulk who's huge, but now you got Savage coming on like a firecracker. What was that period like, Bruce? You know, what was it like between the two? Listen, bro, I don't want to get into, you know, dirt or nothing like that, but what was that like?
Well, I mean, believe it or not, I would have to say Hulk encouraged it a lot because Hulk was looking to go away, to go do the movies and go do different things, and he wanted a break. So you're looking around going, okay, well, who's going to replace Hulkamania? And it was just a groundswell underneath. And here was this guy coming along, stealing the show every night, just working harder than everybody else every night. Whenever he went out there, he was the star. And he couldn't be denied. You know, that's one thing you try and tell young talents today. It's like you work hard and you bust your ass. It's, well, I didn't get a push. Bullshit. Go take it. Go push yourself. Mm-hmm. So that they cannot deny you. Daniel Bryan's a perfect example of that. Didn't change a thing. Just smiled and did his thing. They loved him. Let him have it, you know? Mm-hmm. And Randy was not going to be denied. It just wasn't going to happen. He worked harder. He was the first one there. He was the last one to leave, fought hard, and he earned it. That's one of the guys. When you look at the guys that were to succeed Hulk, on his own, Randy, without beating Hulk, okay, that was the other thing. He didn't beat Hulk for the Hulk dust. Probably was the biggest draw outside of Hogan in that era. And, Warrior had the luxury, if you will, of having defeated Hulk to get that blessing. And even that, Hulk was on the other cards, just being Hulk Hogan with Earthquake, and he was out drawing on top with Rude and the other side. Yeah, Randy just worked harder, man. He wanted it. He took it.
Bruce, it's so funny because you're talking about Randy worked hard, he took the spot, but then we're talking about on Randy's heels, oh, by the way, the Ultimate Warrior, Ravishing Rick Rude, Kurt Hennig. Bruce, I'm still trying to figure out, why did we have that era? And when we look at wrestling today, and it seems like literally two guys are over, Bruce, is it just the level of talent? Is it the training that they're going through? Is it the system? What is failing us today that, like you said, back WrestleMania 4 or 5, bro, we don't have 12 guys that are over the moon.
Well, look at the guys that you mentioned, Rick Rude, Kurt Hennig. These were guys that had come along in the territories, that had a lot of experience before they ever came to the main stage. And then when we got him to the main stage, again, a character, Kurt Hennig, to teach him how to be perfect. And it was the craziest damn thing. When that light went on with Kurt, he became, and you remember the darts, the dart vignette? Mm-hmm. We did that in Vince's house. Kurt could stand 15 feet away from the dartboard all day long. We're setting cameras and lights and nail it. Bullseye. And just, damn camera would go on and it would hit the wall. It would hit everything else. And it got to the point, that's when you look at some of it and I'd say, Kurt, no matter what happens, no matter what you do, that's perfect. We finally got it through a lot of camera angles and everything. And that was another thing. We didn't cut. So you had to see that Kurt actually did it. You didn't putt and then go to another camera and see the ball go in the hole. We did it one shot so that you saw that was really Kurt. But the dart was, we used a long lens to give you the illusion that he was far away.
Right.
And he was probably about 3 or 4 feet away from the dartboard when we finally got the take. When you turn the camera off, son of a bitch would nail it every time.
Yeah.
But you had guys to draw from. You had a lot. You had people, Duggan, DiBiase, Gang, all those guys that came in, man, they were seasoned veterans. They were ready for the show, but they had already been in the show and big time in their areas.
Bruce, I have to ask you this too. Bruce, you started in Houston, and then Paul Bosch, and then I think you worked a little bit for Watts. Bruce,
Freddie, yeah.
Yeah. Did you work with Warrior down in Texas when he was the Dingo Warrior before he became the Ultimate Warrior in WWE?
I worked with him before he was the Dingo Warrior, when he was Blade Runner Rock.
Here's
3 months in the business.
Here's what I want to ask you, Bruce. And obviously I'm talking about unfortunately a lot of the guys that have passed. I want to talk about Dusty next. I know he was a huge influence to you. But Bruce, I was able to, I was lucky enough to form a relationship with Warrior. But bro, it was when he was at that level with all the Warriorisms, and he was like just on a different planet. What was that? Destrucity, yes. And bro, I got to tell you, I was so entertained by the guy because nobody else on the roster spoke like him or thought like him, and I was really drawn to him. But You knew him in those early days when I'm sure he was a much, much different guy.
Yeah, I did. Great body, great look, man. If you were gonna carve out a monster wrestler, you would carve him. Mm-hmm. He just always had a chip on his shoulder, and always he didn't. I'm a big one for you should pay your dues. Okay, I always believe that people should have to pay their dues. And he didn't believe that. He thought that he should be on top regardless of the level of skill that he had, which wasn't a lot. And he just thought he knew a lot more than he did. And because of his look, because of his personality and intensity, more than anything, is what got him over, what got him noticed. Because, you know, I don't mean to speak ill of the dead, and I put on my Twitter when rest in peace, and people call me a hypocrite because I never really spoke well of him. You still feel bad when one of your contemporaries leaves the earth a lot sooner than they ever should have. Mm-hmm. And I didn't speak to him for many years after he left us, but the interactions I had with him weren't always the best. Still, he's a man with a family and two, beautiful daughters and everything. I feel horrible about that. And I'm sure that deep down, because you look at those kids and they look like they're pretty sharp kids. Yeah. And the love you can see between a father and his family, that to me spoke more about Jim Hellwig, Warrior, than anything. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, I mean, just because he was not the easiest guy in the world to work with when he first broke into business, and later when he became, what he became, doesn't make him a bad person at the end of the day. They're doing what they have to do. But he was a little difficult in the early days. He really was. But he was a draw. He had charisma, and it was off the chart. So
that was another one, Bruce. It's like I look back at that and I'm like, Bruce, like you, bro, I worked with many guys on their promos, and it's like, how could you teach a guy like Warrior to cut a promo like that? You can't teach somebody to do that, man.
No, somebody needed to teach us to understand it.
Exactly. But I think it was better that we didn't understand it. Hey, Bruce, what were the early roots with you and Dusty?
God, Dusty would always come to Houston. His mom lived in Houston. So Dusty would always come in around the holidays, and he would always work for Paul, and his mom would come in. And so as a kid, I would watch out for his mom, make sure she was in the box okay and make sure that she was taken care of. And Dusty was just a character. And as I got older and I started doing more things and I started announcing and doing different things like that, and then later on with Watts and so on and so forth. We knew each other, but he always looked at me kind of as, the kid. What's up, kid? How you doing? What's up, kid? And I grew in the business and held some of the positions I held, that here's the kid come and tell him what to do. And that was a little hard for him sometimes. But I had so much respect for him, and with all of that, man, Dusty was the kind of guy that was always teaching and always looking out for everybody. That's why when you read about him being selfish, I never saw that. I saw the other side, because I saw this guy that would look at the opening match and say, this kid here's got it. What you need to do, you need to bring him up slowly, and he has nexus, and you got to go for him. And the mind was always going. And we had a love-hate relationship. But he was the best. I traveled with him. I loved Dusty. Oh my God! But he was one of those old timers that could adapt to any situation, and make it his own.
Yeah,
he was great. Doesn't even begin.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, Bruce, let me ask you this: from where I sit and from the way I witness things, while we work together at the WWF. I knew, bro. Is it fair to say your closest relationship in the business was probably Taker?
Well, yeah, Taker, Jerry Briscoe.
Yeah, Briscoe. We'll talk about those guys in a minute. Bruce, I love, you got to tell this story. I love, because I know how instrumental you were in the birth of Taker, the history of Taker, all that stuff at the early beginning and all the way through Kane. I tell everybody Kane was Bruce Prichard's head for a very long time. But I want to start with Taker. I love, bro, the story you told me when Paul Bearer, I miss that guy so freaking much. It's horrible. But the first time he was called into the office and the whole you laying out Undertaker and Paul Bearer, I remember you telling me that story and I was like, it almost sounded like a fairy tale to me. Could you give us a little bit of that?
The original thing was obviously me and Undertaker, because I had this idea of black and white and Brother Love in his mind being the purest of pure. And the only way to purify this evil that was the Undertaker was for me to guide him, and these two evil, sick people. And the original Undertaker idea was Kane the Undertaker. That lasted about a week. Or drop the Kane, but the reason for that was because he was the first man to commit murder, Cain and Abel. And so, perfect with Brother Love. And Vince had come to me, and I had other duties in the studio with production and so on and so forth, and said, we've got to make a choice. You're either going to be a talent, or you're going to be in production and in the office. And I chose production. Killed me, but I chose it. So Paul Bearer comes in. Percy Pringle. He's got bleach blonde hair and so on and so forth, and they're laying all this stuff out. And Vince and Pat are sitting there, and they said, well, what do you do? I mean, you're not working right now. Dallas is closed down. What do you do? Well, I'm a funeral director. I have my morticians. I'm a mortician. I'm a funeral director. And everybody just popped because we had this conversation with me. We were looking for somebody for Taker. And all of a sudden, it's Paul Bearer, but we couldn't think of a name. And Mike Hegstrand, Road Warrior Hawk, and I are sitting there talking and trying to think of a name, and we've done his hair black and the black mustache and everything. And Hegstrand is taking a shit in the stall. And I'm outside the stall, and we're talking through the stall door and all this, and he says, hey, I got the name for Percy. Paul Bearer. And it fit. I mean, it was just perfect. And I laid it out to Percy, and we did our thing. And, what's your name? Paul. Paul what? Bearer. And he was born, man. It was perfect. They were just perfect together.
Bruce, I swear to you, there are times that I even hate to admit this because it's embarrassing, okay? Bruce, when I would see some of the greats just cut promos in rings, and like the hair would go up on my arms, I'd become a kid again. I swear, there were times when I'd start crying. Literally, my eyes would well up, and he was one of those guys. Every time he went out, you felt like, oh my God, I'm a 12-year-old kid again, and I was 35 years old at the time.
Because he told you a story. In his promos, man, he told you a story. He took you on a ride. And that's what's missing. The guys that come out today, and it's bullet points, and they're trying to get all their verbiage in, instead of sitting back and taking people on a ride. Just tell them a little story. You got a little beginning, you get a middle with a high spot here and there, and then you got a big finish. It's not hard.
Bruce, you want to hear something that's amazing? I started reviewing and looking back at some, like almost doing like a director's cut of the Attitude Era shows, because I'll be honest with you, bro, it's difficult for me to watch Raw every week. It is. So I'm going to watch a week of Raw, then we're going to go look at the Attitude Era. Bruce, we started like December 17th or something like that, 1987, okay? And no, 1997, I'm sorry. And Kane just came on the scene. And Bruce, and it's when Taker won't touch him. Taker won't touch him. And, bro, Paul Bear is in there just laying out this beautiful story. And that's exactly what I said. Listen to this guy. Bro, why is that a lost art, Bruce?
Because nobody takes time to tell stories anymore. They want to go do this and move on to the next thing. They don't let the stories sink in and give people time to have an emotional attachment. And, you look at a Kane character and how the Kane character even came to be. We're sitting there trying to come up with an opponent for The Undertaker. And we had Glenn Jacobs down in Smoky Mountain Wrestling. And I said, what if he had a brother? But he didn't know he had a brother. And again, it was my infatuation with the name Kane. And I'm thinking, Undertaker really took Kane's name to honor his brother that died in a fire.
Yeah.
But what really happened is that he made it out alive. He's severely burned and maimed, and they hid it from Undertaker because Taker accidentally set the fire, thinking he killed his mom and dad and his brother. And he's carried around this guilt his whole life, and his brother knew this. And Kane,
Bruce, let me stop you right there for a minute. Hold on right there. Hold on. Bro, in WWE creative meetings, however it's structured nowadays, Bruce, what are the chances that stories like that are getting laid out with that type of passion?
I don't know. I don't know. I doubt they are.
I remember when you were there sitting there doing that. I remember, Bruce, being on the edge of my seat. You had, from A to Z, and then to make it come alive.
And that's exactly what it felt like. It felt like Frankenstein when he's alive. But that's what it feels like when your character comes to life, and they're coming to life just as you envisioned it. And you can sit there and you can watch them. And it's like Taker, man. When I managed Taker early on, you go back and you watch his matches when he debuted. Back in the day, everybody had exactly the same match. British Bulldog, same match. The Quebecers, same match. They had their TV match down. They were going to do the same moves, same sequence, same everything. You go back and watch The Undertaker's matches. Everyone was different. We always got old school in there, and we always got to the tombstone. But we started different. We ended different going into the finish every time. His matches were not the same. So he was different. It was a little subtle thing, but it was a big deal, man. And I remember getting in arguments with Strongbow. Oh, he should do this. That's his deal. That's what he does. We'll get back to that. We'll get there. We'll do that in another 2-3 matches down the road. Yeah. By then, at that time, it's 9 weeks since they've seen it. And it's not just a cookie cutter match.
Yeah.
And so that made him unique.
Bruce, I have to ask you this question from both sides of the fence, because you had everything to do with creating and producing and everything with both of these talents. It's a double-edged sword, bro. How do you feel, 20 years later, here's Taker still headlining SummerSlam and getting the same reaction, the same pop. He still looks great. They still believe he's a dead man, the whole 9 yards. But at the same time, we see what has happened with the Kane character, how, he can magically speak and he's wearing a suit and he's got the Eddie Munster haircut and he lets Seth Rollins push him around. What's your feeling when you see both of those characters that were your babies today?
Well, they both have evolved, okay? And in order to make it in anything, you have to evolve and you have to change with the times. And in Undertaker's case, he has always stayed true to the fundamental base character of The Undertaker. And that's always remained the same. I think with Kane, we got away from it as soon as we made the decision to let him speak. Because the art behind that character, it just went away. So everything we had told up until that point, it kind of, okay, you're starting all over. We tried to half-ass recreate it when we took the mask off of him, because if you remember when we took the mask off originally, he had the botched haircut underneath, and for personal reasons, it just didn't work out. Mm-hmm. And when you have a talent and a human being like Kane, you know what? There's nothing that he would really ever say no to. And he wasn't comfortable with that. And I knew if he wasn't comfortable with it, it wouldn't work. It wouldn't continue to work. Yeah. But I think had we gone down that road with him, it would have kept a little bit of the mystique about him. Everybody grows, some for better, some for worse.
Bruce, I got to ask you this question, and I love that you're on, because everybody, listen, I could talk till I'm blue in the face and do 1,000 interviews, but people still that hate Vince Russo like to give me the rap. Oh, you take credit for everything. You take credit for everything. You take credit for everything. And trust me, I don't, which I want to get to my next story, okay? When I was just on the fringe of sitting in the background with you and Cornette, and kind of just listening and seeing what was happening, I remember you, bro. You explained to me the idea on the table of making Vince McMahon a character. That was not Vince Russo. That was in the making before I even started. Bruce, I got to ask you this, bro. And I think I know the answer to this, but I got to ask you anyway. I'm going to get back on this in a minute. Nobody worked more closely with Vince than you did. Nobody. The only one possibly... Pat Patterson, but I think you were around Vince a lot more than Pat. Pat kind of came in and out of the office, but Pat. But here's what I want to ask you, Bruce. Being that close to him, when you were talking the early stages, you got to go on camera, bro, did you have any idea that he was going to be as big an a-hole on camera and as big over as a heel that he eventually came? I mean, did you just know, like, that deep down inside, like, Vince just had, D-I-C-K written all over him?
That's who he was. I mean, that's who he was. Yeah, okay, I'll give you a perfect example. We're driving to Madison Square Garden. Pat Patterson's driving. I'm in the front seat. Vince is sitting behind Pat. Jerry Jarrett is sitting behind me in the back seat. And we're driving along. And this is because I always messed with Vince about, you're the character. If we could just get a you, hey. But we're driving along and I start laughing. And I'm just kind of giggling to myself. And Vince goes, "What, Bruce?" It's nothing. God damn it, what? What are you laughing at? I said, I just find it kind of funny. I said, here I am, kid from Texas, just wanted to be a wrestler, man. I just wanted to be in the business, Pat Patterson, kid from Montreal, just wanted to be a wrestler. We're sitting in the front seat, and we're riding with probably the two most hated motherfuckers this business has ever known. And Vince starts laughing. Well, Jerry Jarrett, who obviously can't step outside of himself and look back viewpoint of himself, was like, huh? What do you mean? I can't think of one person that doesn't like me. Well, look, there's 3 in the car, Jerry. Come on. You know, I got 3 here. What are you talking about? But I would constantly be just... Vince had this vision of himself that he was the play-by-play guy, and that the fans did not know that Vince McMahon owned the WWF, did not know that he had anything to do with it, and only saw him as a play-by-play guy. It's Vince, it's 92, 93, yes, they know. They know your pal, you own it. Half of it, okay? So they know that you're the boss. Be the boss. They don't believe Jack Tunney is the boss. They don't believe to the boss. Go to the paper in the New York Daily News and see the boss on the front page. And it was back to a different voice, a different view to him. Okay. And the Montreal, you go back to the Montreal incident. When we got Vince after the fact in the studio, with the black eye and the turtleneck, and Brett screwed Brett. He thought that was a babyface promo.
Oh, God.
And then it was like, that got him to, when he walked out, started listening to the people, hearing the reactions to him walking out to do play-by-play. They hated him.
Yeah. So
that was, was thank God, organic enough for him to finally hear what everybody else saw and heard.
Yeah. Hey, Bruce, let me ask you this from a personal perspective. Listen, I got a glimpse of Vince, nowhere near what you have. Like I said, you and Pat were always the 2 closest, without a shadow of a doubt. So very rarely did I get a glimpse of the real Vince, because he likes people to believe the persona. I used to get the biggest kick out of when I would ride in an elevator with him, and an office person would just get in the elevator and be scared to death that they were, and you knew he was eating it up. He just loved that. But Bruce, yeah, thank you. But Bruce, as a guy that literally formed a friendship with Vince McMahon, what are the traits of him and the glimpses of him that you got to see in those moments that not even a handful of people have ever seen? Maybe you, maybe Pat, maybe Kevin Dunn. But what about those moments of the real Vince? What about him would people just not believe?
Well, first of all, I love Vince McMahon. He's a human being. I still do consider him a friend. He's a genius. I loved working with him. He was a fair boss, and he was a great guy to be around. I learned from him, you're constantly learning from him. And if you're not, then there's something wrong. He would be what people wouldn't believe. He is probably one of the kindest, gentlest, nicest, most giving people I've ever had the pleasure of being around. I can't tell you the different things he's done for me on a personal level, much less taking a 24-year-old kid out of Texas and employing him up in Stamford, Connecticut, and taking a chance on him without really knowing me from Adam. So, but he is, he's a workaholic. You can't deny him. For people to bitch and say, "Oh God, he's working me too hard," I guarantee you, he's working 10 times harder.
Yeah. Bruce, I always used to say, when people ask me about Vince, this is what I always say, and you know what I'm saying. I always say, no matter how early I went to work or how late I left, Vince's car was there. Period, end of story. No matter what time, bro, he was always there.
Yep, and working out, just constantly thinking. You know, I used to get the phone calls 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. Hey, pal, what are you doing? I was doing, but I didn't sleep a whole lot. And he knew that, so he would call those times. But it didn't matter, and you needed to be on. If you were going to be in that spot, you needed to be on, and you were on call. And I remember making a comment one time because I moved to a new house, and we switched to one of the carriers, AT&T or something. And the reception at my house was horrible. He said, "Don't give me that bullshit. Get another goddamn phone if the reception's bad." It was a comment, okay? I'm on the phone with you now. Just telling you, you know. But, you know, I mean, he's the best at what he does. And he expects the best out of everybody that's around him. And if you're not willing to do that, then, you know, step aside, because he'll find somebody else that can. They may not be able to do it as long or as good, but he'll get everything out of them. You know, we'd always tell Pat, you know, when Pat's laying in a hospital bed on a respirator, that Vince will still be in there with the book. Like, "Patrick, what do you think here?"
And Bruce, go ahead, finish up. Go ahead.
No, he's a wonderful, wonderful human being. People that only view from the outside in and have never had the opportunity to spend any time with the guy. He's real. It's, you know, I just laugh when people that have never met these people and they're forming opinions about people they've never had the opportunity to speak to, that they've never had the opportunity to spend even a minute with, and talk about what horrible people that they are. Yeah. It's not fair. And again, you look at the family, and I think he did pretty good there. He's got 2 talented kids. He's been a success. You know, he's had a share of things that flopped, and he'll embrace those. You know, I throw the XFL up there, man. I was there every friggin' game. God, I can tell you. Brian Gewirtz is still trying to get me to write the XFL from one person's viewpoint. Yeah. That's a book in and of itself. No one would believe that, though. But, you know, he's got balls. He's got balls, man. That's what I love about him, man. He's just, you know, he's going to go out and he's going to go balls to the wall. Everything he does.
Bruce, I'm going to ask you another question, and you may be the only one that can answer this question or give the best answer. You know, I know how tight, you know, you and Pat Patterson was, and man, another great human being that I miss so much. I mean, I haven't spoken to Pat in years. Bruce, I'm going to ask you a question, okay? Bruce, why is it that nobody, maybe since the beginning of time, can lay out a match like Pat Patterson? Seriously, like what, bro? Bruce, I remember, Bruce, you know, the older I get, the more I forget, okay? But I remember moments.
I can relate.
Yeah, well, Bruce, I remember moments. And here's a moment that always sticks out in my mind. I remember Pat Patterson and Bret Hart sitting on a golf cart going over Bret's match, and me just listening, like, knowing right then and there how fortunate I was to be the fly on the wall. Bro, what was it about Pat that nobody can lay out a match like him?
He's a unique son of a gun, I tell you that. Pat is the best finish man in the business. Because Pat could see both sides. Pat would get in the heads and become The Rock, and then he would become Triple H, and he would see it from both sides, and he would think, as The Rock, you know, yeah, I'm going to do this. And then, you son of a bitch, at the pig. And it was, you're right, it was one of the most entertaining things in the world to watch Patrick lay out a match because he did both guys. But the key to a Pat Patterson laying out a match and other guys laying out a match, and I'm as guilty as anybody, but I've learned to ask the question. Most guys would lay out a match, okay, here's how we want to start, and here's the finish. Okay, so you know how you're going to start the match, you know how you're going to end the match, and then it's up to you to figure out the middle. Pat would start with the finish, then he would go to the beginning, and then he would look at you and they'd go, okay, I got it. He goes, no. Tell me now how you're going to get there. And he would force the talent to explain it in a logical way to get to that finish and to get out of the beginning. And he would take them step by step logically. Well, if you did this, what happens? Not, okay, I bing. He goes, okay, you bing. What happens? These guys, thinking in their head, they're laying things out, and he's sitting back and he's visualizing it in his head. And he's seeing it in the ring. And if it's not making sense to him, he'd call him out.
It's right about
but Patrick is an idiot savant genius when it comes to the wrestling business. No, he'll never be anybody like him.
No. And Bruce, I feel like I'm like your long lost son here, Daddy. Tell me more. And like I haven't even scratched the surface with you. Two more things I want to give Bruce credit for. Two more things.
Two more. That's it.
But then we got to get it. We got so much to cover, and then I got to move on.